Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the course Environmental Impact Assessment. In the previous lectures, we set base for law, policy and guidelines and saw key aspects, and then we also looked at the differences between law and policy with examples. So from this session onwards, we will develop on domain-specific understanding. We'll look at domain-specific law, policy and guidelines, and for today we'll look at air. So our coverage for today would be like we'll add few more things to concepts of policy, and then we'll look at the forms of governance approaches and policy instruments in particular to air, and then we'll look at the global environmental agreements which are relevant to climate change, stratospheric ozone depletion and PPT. So the expected learning outcomes from you after completion of this session include that you should be able to describe key concepts of the policy. You should be able to review different forms of governance approaches which are adopted and different policy instruments which are adopted for the purpose of meeting any particular objective. Then you should be able to connect the global environmental agreements to the national initiatives. So we have been looking at the global level a lot of things. Then how do they really connect at the global initiative level? And we will look at all these global initiatives related with climate change and ozone depletion and so on. So moving on to the key concepts of the policies. Policies play an important role in creating and improving the state of our environment. How is our environment is determined by the policy, and how we can improve what that also is guided a lot by the policies. So policy as such is the statement of intent to change behavior in a positive way. So what really we want to do, that is what policy determines, whereas policy instrument is the means or a specific measure, like how we are going to really make those positive change and what means we are going to use to translate that intent into action. So that is what is meant by policy instrument. So whenever we say policy instrument, so it talks about the means of doing translating those intent into actions. Further, we see that governance is also like is the process whereby like societies and organization make important decisions, determine whom they will involve and how they will be held accountable for all these aspects. So you see policy instruments as well as the governance part of it, where you assign people to undertake responsibility, people and institution, as well as you make them accountable for their responsibilities. So whenever we look at the policy, we look at both the aspects, the intent and the instrument. So policy which involves like goal setting, including targets, what indicators and time frame will have, it's an important step towards making it real. So we need to have targets, we need to have indicators and a time frame. And the execution of the policy instrument is through effective governance. And we saw that what governance is, it's the process whereby the society or organization make important decisions. So one of the example of this is SDG, where we are governing through goals. So we have certain targets and we are like at the global level, at the national level, even at the state level, regional level, we are trying to attain those goals. So when we deal with the environmental policies, we use multiple methods of governance. So not just one, but we determine we comprehensively use different modes for governance and involve different set of actors. When I say set of actors, like we mean governments, private sectors, even the NGOs, even politicians, even think tank, the researchers, education, institutions, NGOs, even the lobbyists, and then the communities, and also industries and companies. So we involve different sets of actors, and they all have a role to play, and they influence what will be the final results of the policy outcome, and they influence it in the different contexts. So policy objectives are achieved through instruments. Instruments are structured activities targeted to meet the goals. In practice, we see both primary and secondary policy instruments. For example, primary instrument policy, like you have energy and transport policy, which include environmental policy goals. So primary environmental policies are which are targeted towards the environment. Then we see secondary policy, which has prime non-environmental goals. So it's not really targeted at environmental goals, but then it does contributes in reducing the burden on the environment. So for example, you can see the reducing congestion, traffic congestion. So when we reduce the traffic congestion, in return, indirectly, we also contribute in handling the environmental problems. So these are called the secondary policy. So policy instruments are created and implemented at the regional level, at the global level, and also at the national level. So you have already seen a lot of global level policies. Now we'll also align it with national and regional level. So now there is growing number of also we see public-private partnership and corporate sustainability initiatives. So even there are different players coming in where people are coming together, and then there's also sustainability initiative which is going on, and then also NGOs are also actively participating, even the companies are actively participating. So for the purpose of design and production of goods, we also see there's risk assessment, training, monitoring, reporting, and interventions, and so on. So it's just not the one thing. There are a range of things which are used to handle environmental problem, and then you see where EIA falls, and then how other range of things, policy, law, and also influence each other. So with such collective approach, it is through such collective approach that we are able to realize the target and goals. We are able to meet that. So the prime challenge, like you can see how different actors are there are multiple tools. So the prime problem with this is that how to really integrate all of them together, and they are at different scale, they are at different time, and at different context. So that challenge remains, but that has been handled. So what really, when policy instruments are they can take different forms. What we really try to do, so we have we look at three important things here, like how the available alternatives can be amended, like whatever is happening right now, what kind of change we can bring in that. Or we also look into what is alternatives, like what ways are available to us at this moment, how the impact of those ways can change, how the same process can be altered so that the impact is reduced. And the last one we see is that how we are evaluating the outcomes, the evaluation of it can be influenced. So majorly we see these three mechanisms which are employed. So now there's a lot of policy integration and raising of public awareness to policy coherence. So you see all of these there. So there's another term which you look at, that is policy coherence. So which is about putting all the things together well coordinated and in a very systematic approach. And for that, now you must be hearing about green economy. So it allows to really put everything systematically in a coordinated manner, all different kind of mechanism which are used, applied. So some common types of policy instrument include we had seen the difference between policy and law, whereas some of the document indicate that the policy legislation also comes within the policy instrument. So some of the policy instrument include legislation, regulation policies, standards, market based instruments, financial incentives when you encourage people to buy something or you discourage people to buy something, disincentives, and then voluntary approaches, then also treaties and agreements, and then the international soft law, voluntary agreements, research and development, and information instruments. So all these are like policy instruments. And the success of any policy is measured by how it speeds up the work to achieve all these internationally agreed goals. And especially success is seen in when it really addresses to the root cause. And if you recollect, we talked about the drivers of environmental change we saw. So if through policy we are able to attack the root cause, change the root cause, then that's considered to be more successful. So environmental policy has been typically developed to protect different environmental aspects like air, water, land. These are usually under the control of an environmental ministry. So we have Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in our country. We need to take care of both the state of environment and also curtail the drivers of environmental change. So if you look at the ministry, it takes care of what is the situation right now, and then what kind of changes we are bringing. So these institutions and policies are developed to address the most important polluting sectors like energy, mobility and industry. So you'll find range of other ministries also looking into. So let us try to understand one more term which is usually used in terms of policy. So that's cluster of policy. So when we say cluster of policy, it is a collection of policy instruments all designed to achieve a common goal or set of intentions. So what intention you place in policy, and then the instrument. So it's the group collection of policy instruments together. So that we refer as cluster of policy. So when developing policy mixes, so when we prepare the cluster of policy or policy mix, there is need to have coherence. Coherence meaning that they all should align well with each other, and has to be ensured in order to achieve like the desired goal. So like the policies are mutually reinforcing, they should strengthen each other, and they should not really negate each other. And this could be like the sectorial policies, like some in the energy section, some in the transportation section. So all these should come together and reinforce each other. And then they should also reinforce at different levels, at the state level, national level and the global level. So we also need policy synergy. So there's another term which comes as synergy, which is also said to be necessary. And we're looking at the meaning of this, which means that environmental concerns need to be incorporated in other policy sectors also. So it's not just the environmental policies, but these concerns have to be embedded and considered in the other policies of other sectors also. So when we do that, then this such kind of approach helps in like attaining, integrating things, and then also bringing them together to attain the coherence. So policy synergy occurs when all policy instruments have a cumulative or reinforcing impact in achieving the common goal. So this was about little more about the policies which we discussed in the previous class also. So some more terminologies to learn about. So now looking at the forms of governance approaches and policy instruments, and particular to air domain, what we're going to look at. So in order to tackle air pollution problem, range of governance approaches and policy instruments are used. We use it for like mitigating the source, like from where the pollution is coming. So we need to reduce that. So how we really mitigate the source. Then impact of air pollution. So what kind of impact is happening? So how do we reduce that? And then how do we reduce the climate change? And then how do we reduce the ozone depletion? And then how do we really curtail persistent bioaccumulative and toxic substance (PBTs)? How do we really curtail that? And we saw all of these in the environmental status report. So when we tackle pollution problem, so we look at all these aspects. And there are a number of international and national, subnational and regional policies that have been arranged to address these challenges. So if you look at these, so you may focus on these terms. These terms are frequently used. So you see that the fundamental forms include that technology or emission standards, and they are mainly referred as command and control. So you'll take care of this term, command and control, which covers all the technologies, emission standards, which are covered under this. So in order to all the aspects, pollution control, emission reduction, everything. So what technology and emission standards are used, they are referred as command and control. And then there's another term which says planning regime. Then you see market intervention, public information, and then also cooperative forums, including international agreements. So how do we collaborate? What kind of agreements are there? So these 5 terms you would be seeing frequently. So command and control, it includes the technology, emissions or ecosystem restoration standards. It can also have record keeping and then how the reporting has to be done. So you see in SDG also how we have annual reports where we report our attainment, how we have reached all the targets, or limits on manufacturing, like what limit we set up, how much one can what's the upper capping that has to be there in the manufacturing industries, then what capping we do in the trade, or what usage of specific chemicals or products, and each of which is implemented through permitting and enforcing programs. So it is also done with permissions and enforcement programs. So that's called command and control. When we look at planning regime are important and are basic to managing air pollution, climate change and ozone depletion, and also controlling PBTs, persistent bioaccumulative and toxic substances, because they provide way of integrating several actions. So planning regime is the entire domain where you look at in the air, and then you see how they are contributing towards controlling the air. So planning regimes are like, they are the actions, they are the strategies, and which are designed to attain ambient air quality standards. So how we have set certain standards and how we are going to attain it. So there's not just one way, but we are going to attain it to multiple modes. And or we are going to have certain emission ceiling, we'll put capping, as you saw in all the timeline also, that how we had cappings, we determined capping, all nations determined their capping. So how we are going to attain that, and these all combined with analysis, and also this planning regime includes environmental impact assessment. So how we are going to do all these, how we are going to incorporate in environmental impact assessments, how we are going to have ceiling, and then how we are going to have the implement the quality standards. So planning regime, or we can also call a framework or ways of doing things, it establish ambient targets, like what kind of concentration standards will be there, what kind of total pollution load will be there. So if pollution happens, what will be our upper capping to that. So and emission budgets or the ceilings and so on. So that helps us to determine that. So that is one term we see. Other terminology we see is cluster of policies, which I explained to you before as well. So cluster of policies are then developed and implemented to meet the targets or the budget. So you create a group of policies. Then you have marketing interventions. So these are including economic instruments such as taxes, fees, or markets for tradable emission rights. So you also saw in all the timeline when we were seeing that we had tradable emission rights. All these are market interventions. And then apart from that, you have public information like including product labeling, air quality forecasting, near real-time observations and training. So how you prepare people, how do you inform people, how constantly you feed information. And then you have cooperative framework, like where you have international agreements and NGOs and all those sectorial standards come in. So now moving on to our other thing is now looking at global environmental agreements. So in concern with air, what are the global environmental agreements? And then simultaneously we'll also look at national level. We have seen in the timeline range of global agreement. The successful global agreement is the Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol to address ozone depletion, and which in 2009 became the first UN convention to be ratified by all United Nations members. So the most recent amendment to the Montreal Protocol is like Kigali 2016, where we designated the limit the impact of ozone depleting substances on climate change. So we had set those targets. In the image, you can see global environmental agreement relevant to climate change, ozone depletion and PBT. So you can see range of agreements which are there, which are concerned with air. So you can see the 1992 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement. Then you can see something related with ozone depletion. So you have Vienna Convention, Montreal, and then you can also see PBT chemicals. You have Basel Convention, Rotterdam, Stockholm, and Minamata Convention on mercury, which you see here the list. So we see that air pollution travels around the world. So if you see that we had discussed about the oceans also, like how it's very difficult to really have a governance regime for that. Similarly with the air pollution also travels around the world, but we see that there is no single global agreement on the air pollution, and it's as per the context that everyone has different sets of rules and regional international agreements. So in this figure you can see how they vary. All the policies vary across the countries. So the oldest and the most developed is the 1979 Convention on Long Range Transboundary Air Pollution, and then you also see Russian Federation and Central Asia. Overlaps with the grouping of agreements with the umbrella of Asia and Pacific Clean Air Partnership. So there are 3 regional agreements on air pollution in Africa, which overlap each other and have few members in common with the Council of Arab Ministers responsible for environment. So you see how those work are there. Further, we see to guide their air pollution policies, many countries have developed national ambient air quality standards. So you see that with the global targets and the local context, how to handle that. So many countries have developed national ambient air quality standards, or they have developed guidelines for number of common pollutants. So and these standards vary with these standards would vary across countries. So you would see that they can differ with respect to like what are the pollutants which are targeted, what are the concentration levels, what is the averaging timing, And then what's the frequency of all these pollutants occurring, and then what is the measurement protocol in that particular country, and then how strict they could be and how difficult or easy it would be to implement any kind of strategy. So depending on that, you really set up standards or guidelines in any country related with the pollutant. So just to summarize what we covered in this session, we looked at the key concepts of the policies, and then we reviewed the governance approach for policy instruments. Then we also looked at the global environmental agreements, and same time we looked at our context also, and then with complete focus on air. So these were the references for reading purpose. You can see that, and I have already suggested the book in this subject, so you can look at these, and I'm going on telling the chapters also which are involved while we do this. And these are the suggested watch and read which you can see for this particular section. So please feel free to ask questions and let us know about any concerns you have. Do share your opinions, experiences and suggestions. Looking forward to interacting and co-learning with you while exploring AI. Thank you.